Hello and welcome to my Throne of Thunder raid guide. My name is Aliena, and in this video I'll show you all you have to know about Iron Quan, the 10th boss in this new raid instance. We completed this fight with 2 tanks, 3 healers, and 5 DPS, but similar raid configurations may work just as well. Iron Quan is a 4-phase encounter with an emphasis on movement and coordination. In the first 3 phases you fight Iron Quan's 3 mounts one by one, and in the last phase you face Iron Quan himself. When your tank pulls Iron Quan, he'll mount Rorschach, the Fire Quillen. Your tank should pull him back to the middle of the room, and your raid should spread out. Rorschach is centered around molten energy. If he ever reaches 100 energy, it would wipe the raid. For that reason, you want to help deplete his energy. He'll regularly use Molten Inferno, which deals 80k raid damage and rids him of 10 molten energy. That by itself is not enough though. You want to force Rorschach to use Unleashed Flame, which requires at least 3 people to be grouped up and deals 700k damage divided by the stacked members. When a group takes Unleashed Flame, they get a debuff called Scorched that increases fire damage taken for 30 seconds and stacks, so we switch groups after 2 stacks of Scorch. You can have your groups take 3 or more stacks if they survive through it, but 2 seem to save number for us. We had our melee DPS and second tank form group 1, then 1 ranged DPS and 2 healers form group 2, and 2 ranged DPS and the last healer form group 3. Once a group had 2 stacks of Scorch, we called for the next group to stack together. If it's not a group's turn to be stacked up, they must be spread out at least 10 yards apart to avoid accidentally soaking Unleashed Flame when it's not their turn. In this phase, Iron Quan will use a Fire Spear on random ranged raid members. The location will be marked by the spear, and shortly after, lines of fire will emit from it. If a raid member crosses a line, they take a stacking fire dot. This is not a big deal with only a stack or 2, but bathing in a line will stack up the dot quickly and make the person in question hard to heal since there's a lot of other AoE damage going out. Lines should only be crossed to stack up with your group when you have to, otherwise try to avoid them. There's one ability that Iron Quan uses throughout the whole fight, Impale. He uses this on the current tank and it inflicts a stacking bleed effect. We had our tanks taunt off of each other after 2 impales. Once you defeat Rorschach, Iron Quan will mount Quetzal, the Lightning Quillen. The previous Fire Spear will turn into a Lightning Spear that emits storm lines. Running over a line will cause the person to take 200k damage and take 1 stack off a debuff. At 3 stacks, they get stunned for 20 seconds. The stun is dispellable, but no one should have to run over a line 3 times. Quetzal uses an ability called Arcing Lightning. This stuns a random raid member, puts a dot debuff on them, and a storm cloud over them. They are immune to healing effects while stunned, so it's imperative that another raid member runs over to them and clicks on them to break them out of the storm. The dot debuff is contracted by being near someone else that has the debuff. Since you will have to continuously break people out of the storm, it's likely that most if not all of your raid will contract the debuff in this phase. It is imperative that your raid drops the debuff in phase 3 by being spread out, otherwise you will have to deal with heavy raid damage for the rest of the encounter. Quetzal's last ability is Windstorm. This is very reminiscent of Razor Cyclones, except this time you actually have to run to the other side of the arena to get out of it. Healing damage and absorbs are reduced by 80% while in the tornado, so it's all about getting out of it as fast as possible. Movement speed increasing effects are useful here, as well as stacking up a Spirit Shell before Windstorm is cast. Hitting a Cyclone will pick you up and most likely be a death sentence, so try to avoid that. After Windstorm is over, you'll likely all be grouped up at the edge of the room, and it's fine to remain there until the end of the encounter. Do remember to spread out though. Some Cyclones will remain and occasionally visit, so make sure not to get picked up by them. You will likely get 2 Windstorms before phase 2 is over. It's worth noting that if you have a Warlock in your raid group, they can put a portal up that leads from the middle of the room to the entrance. If you have your healers take the portal, they can heal the rest of the raid that's still in the Windstorm without penalty. In phase 3, you'll face Damran, the Frozen Sage. Compared to the first 2 phases, Damran is fairly easy to handle. At the start of this phase, you should stay spread out, even your melee, to let the Arcing Lightning debuff fall off. Damran will reflect 10% of damage done back at attackers while he is alive. This is a small amount of AoE damage that needs to be healed through. He'll also freeze and shatter a random raid member occasionally, which inflicts moderate raid-wide damage. The spear in this phase will spawn lines that cause a pretty nasty debuff. Per stack, your casting, movement, melee, and ranged speed is reduced by 25%. Even just 1 stack of this is fairly irritating. If a raid member gets up to 4 stacks, they are more or less useless until the effect wears off. Occasionally, Damran will put up a shield on 2 sides of him. You cannot damage him from behind the shield, so you can either move to a side that's clear or wait until the shield runs out. It only stays up for about 6 seconds. Once Damran dies, you finally face Iron Quan himself. In this phase, provided the Arcing Lightning debuff from phase 2 has fallen off every raid member, your raid should stack up. We waited to use our Bloodlust until every raid member was clear of the spear debuff from phase 3 too. Iron Quan has lost his spear, so instead of slamming it into the ground, he now uses an ability called Fist Smash. This is a 7.5 second channel in which he'll deal 10 AoE ticks. This starts out doing little damage, but Iron Quan gains a stacking damage buff as the phase goes on. This serves as a soften rage timer. You want to designate a chain of rate cooldowns for Fist Smashes. Ideally, weaker cooldowns such as Barrier and Devotion Aura should be used for the first few Fist Smashes, and the stronger cooldowns such as Tranquility and Healing Tide should be saved for the later ones. The last abilities he uses are Ignite Cyclone and Freeze Cyclone. You should never be affected by Freeze Cyclone, as that would require your raid to get caught by a Cyclone. Ignite Cyclone, however, will periodically burn all raid members for 20k damage for the rest of the fight. Obviously, that's not a big deal by itself, but it adds to the raid damage already going out in that phase. However, if most of your raid is alive in this phase, and you have a good cooldown chain set up for the Fist Smashes ahead of time, this phase is very easy. The hardest part is living through phase 1 and 2. Once your raid is proficient at stacking up and spreading out in phase 1, and you live through the Windstorm in phase 2, Iron Quan should go down pretty quickly. I'm putting a link to the whole encounter into the video info in case you want to see how we dealt with the various mechanics in detail. Good luck and have fun!